Okay, no, perfect. Okay, okay. Thank you guys so much for joining us for our February Dare call. This one has been our one of our favorites to plan, so we're so excited for the massive turnout. Um, the agenda for this meeting is we're gonna start off with our wonderful guest speaker from Guiding Eyes for the Blind, Miss Melissa Carney. And then Ava is gonna ask her some questions, and then we're gonna open up the floor for you guys to ask her some questions. She is such a wonderful um, font of information, so feel free to ask her anything you want. Next, we're gonna head over to Miss Jessica, who is an Uber and Lyft driver. So we're gonna ask her some questions and get her perspective, like an Uber Lyft driver's perspective on the guide dog advocacy. And then you guys are also gonna have the chance to ask her some questions as well. And next up, we're gonna go into the we have a mock denial skit lined up for you guys. Taylor and Sergio are going to be our wonderful actors in that skit. So look forward to that. And then we're going to round things off with a member of NAGDU. They're going to tell us a bit about NAGDU and the work they do. And then you guys can also ask them questions. So let's hop right in with Miss Melissa Carney, the Community Outreach and Graduate Support Manager at Guiding Eyes for the Blind. It's such a pleasure to have you on this call. Um, Please, Ava, if you could take it away.
Of course. So, hi, my name is Ava. I'm super excited to be able to ask you all these amazing questions that we have for you today. Thanks again for joining us. So, the first question that we have for you is, can you tell us about your journey into the field that you're in today, especially from the perspective of guide dog advocacy?
Sure. Well, hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Good evening. My name is Melissa Carney. I'm the Community Outreach and Graduate Support Manager at Guiding Eyes for the Blind. We're based in Yorktown Heights, New York. My journey to advocacy started in college, so very fitting to be here tonight. Started with advocating for accessible course materials, fighting for reasonable accommodations, and um, I was actually denied. Not denied entry, but I was made to have a very uncomfortable class experience because of my guide dog. Essentially, long story short, I walked into the classroom, the allergy threw a fit, claiming he was allergic to dogs, had me move to the other end of the classroom, and then proceeded to make jokes about me having a guide dog and expressed his discomfort about having a guide dog in the classroom during things like attendance and reading the syllabus, and very, very inappropriate interaction. So that turned into a huge investigation with my college, eventually resulting in his removal. But it was a very stressful and also eye-opening experience. I dealt with things like trash cans being placed in inaccessible locations, and of course, people trying to distract my guide dog, but never had I been discriminated against by a professor. So that really started my journey with being passionate about guide dog advocacy in particular. From there, I spent a lot of time in DC lobbying on Capitol Hill for legislation that would impact people who are blind or visually impaired. And I would say my experience there, as well as my experience as a guide dog user and facing the discrimination I did in college, really informed my journey in wanting to pursue that further as a career. So I came into this position about 3 years ago.
That's really interesting, and I love how, you have to advocate for yourself, which is why you're so driven for this. And,
Yes.
we all appreciate that very much, which is why the next question, could you provide any specific language that guide dog handlers can use when advocating for our rights?
Sure. So we typically talk about advocacy as guide dog handlers in terms of the Americans with Disabilities Act. There's only two questions that can be legally asked under the ADA. And those are, is the animal required because of a disability? And if so, what task or tasks has the animal been trained to perform? A lot of businesses aren't familiar with those two questions, so a lot of our advocacy pertains around educating them on those two questions, but also what is a service animal? Those lines are very blurred between pets, service animal frauds, emotional support animals. The only dogs that legally have rights are service animals, because they are required because of a disability and because they are task trained. Other animals may provide instinctual comfort, but those are not tasks. So even just explaining how those lines have been blurred to businesses, explaining the rights that a guide dog handler has, but also what does behavior look like, right? A lot of people ask, well, how can I tell the difference between a service dog and a pet? It's not the quote unquote uniform they're wearing, the harness, the vest. It is truly the behavior that the dog is displaying and the tasks that it can perform. So that's an important part of educating when you're entering into a business, but also if you feel comfortable to do so, just explaining some of the tasks that your guide dog performs. I choose and advise others to choose compassion above all else. A lot of people, unfortunately, were not given proactive education about people with disabilities, about blindness in general, about guide dogs. So you have to come from a standpoint of, I'm teaching you the basics, and I'm happy to do so if you respect my rights moving forward, right? So always thinking about the fact that a lot of people act through what I like to call unintentional ignorance, and it often falls to us to advocate and to educate as we see fit.
Yeah, and so the next two, I'm gonna actually ask you these two questions together because I feel like they
Sure.
go hand in hand. But it's, how should guide dog handlers respond if the authorities get called? If things escalate, and also what steps should a guide dog handler take if they are being denied access to Uber, Lyft, or a public space?
Sure. So I will start with your second question first, actually, because they tend to go in order of events. If you are denied access, let's say to a business, because Uber and Lyft is a separate issue, so I'll address that as well. But let's say you're denied access to a business, whether that be a grocery store, a restaurant, etc. Again, like I said earlier, you want to make sure you start by educating the business about the Americans with Disabilities Act, but also the differences between pets and service animals, given that those lines between different classes of animals are so blurred these days. Again, explain all of that first. If they're not understanding, escalate the situation to a manager or supervisor or whoever is in control of that establishment. If they continue to give you issues and there's no further manager to escalate that situation to, you are in the right to call the police. Oftentimes, they will call the police, right? So it can be either or. You asked a question about what to do if authorities are called. So assuming that they call, the important thing for you to remember is that perception matters. If you have been calm throughout the entire interaction, if there are witnesses who can speak to the fact that you were calm and polite in your interactions, if you were not threatening in any way and you were simply educating, you have done nothing wrong. So if the authorities come, you can explain all of this. You can explain the nature of the conversation, the nature of the law. Mind you, some law enforcement professionals are ignorant to the federal law. They will say, well, we don't touch things to do with the ADA. So it's important to also be aware of local protections in your state as well that further back up the ADA. Um, Again, key here is remain calm, illustrate the facts. It's hard to keep emotion out of it, but illustrate the facts as best you can. If you have witnesses, that's even better. But your job is to explain to the authorities what exactly transpired and what your rights are as a guide dog handler to be in that space.
Thank you. The next thing is, could you
Oh, sorry.
share?
So I completely forgot. I didn't address your Uber and Lyft question. In that particular instance, it's very tricky, because drivers, as we know, have mixed education around service dog denials and service dogs in general. They're not familiar with the laws, whether they feign ignorance or it's true. We know that they have varying levels of education around this topic. So if you are denied entry into an Uber or Lyft, it's not as if you're in a restaurant or store. You can't really escalate it to a manager. The closest you're going to get is escalating it to the support team. And even that is hit or miss, correct? So when you are speaking to an Uber or Lyft driver, I like to simplify it, break it down, explain to them not just about the ADA, because they may not know applicable laws, but explaining who you are and what the dog does for you. Sometimes explaining the dog in terms of the tasks that he or she performs can make all the difference in education and preventing an escalation or an argument or an unsafe situation. So just trying to explain, I'm blind, I'm unable to see. This is my guide dog who helps me travel. Sometimes just explaining the purpose of the dog, getting past the notion of, the driver sometimes may just see a dog and not understand that the harness signifies something different, or they may not know that you're blind. So sometimes just explaining that can be beneficial. Now, if the driver is not understanding it, even when you try to simplify it, break it down into those terms, it's important that if the driver becomes hostile, you need to remove yourself and your guide dog from the situation. I know it's tempting to continue arguing, to get into the car, but what you're doing is putting yourself at risk. You're putting your dog at risk. So it's important to consider those factors. Also, some dogs react to stress. So if you notice your dog is shaking, your dog is uncomfortable with loud voices, it's important as a guide dog handler above all else to check in with your dog and check in with the needs that you have. Also, if you're running late to an appointment, let's say a critical doctor's appointment, and your number one concern is getting to that doctor appointment to receive treatment, um, yes, you can sit there and argue with the person, but if they've chosen to be ignorant, if they've already made that conscious decision for you, you have to move on with your life. Encourage them to cancel the ride and try to find another way to get there. Try to book another Uber, because at the end of the day, yes, they may receive consequences, but without a system in place to properly penalize these drivers in a way that we see fit, and I know we're all fighting that battle, you are the one that's suffering. You are the one that's being late to that appointment by continuing the conversation with someone who's clearly unwilling to be educated. So just be careful with how you spend your most emotional and physical energy, and be conscientious of your dog's well-being as well.
Thank you. I find that to be really insightful. And, going more into that, how should guide dog handlers address their rights with and when speaking to someone with a different cultural background?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Again, I always go back to the more you can simplify the information and make it relatable, the better. So if, for example, if you say, I can't see, my guide dog helps me get around, for example. Now, maybe we wouldn't ordinarily use that language in our day-to-day lives. It's helpful for someone who's not familiar with a service dog. For a lot of people who live in different places, people with disabilities are not protected by law. And dogs are definitely not protected by law. Dogs are dogs. They don't have a purpose. So explaining what the dog's tasks are in simple terms to someone is important. And always be polite. Always use compassion first when you can. I think a constant error we all make is expecting that someone will know something just because we know it. And that's simply not true. So coming from an area of compassion, knowing that these issues, this law, your rights as a guide dog team may not be familiar to everyone. So you may have to do some basic education and some basic explaining, getting across from the angle of a human being to another human being. And that can be really difficult when it turns hostile. But if you can at least start by doing that, trying to be the bigger person, really trying to appeal to the person and get through, that can be really helpful. Also, sometimes, especially if there is some sort of language barrier, even putting that in writing, right? Maybe they have a translation software they can utilize to make it easier for them to understand. So you can chat them and try to explain that to them. This is not a pet, this is a service dog. But again, really just trying to understand they may be coming from a different place and trying to do your best to educate. It's not a foolproof solution. Sometimes people just want to be right or they want to be hostile, but at least you've done your best to be a compassionate human being, knowing that there's a barrier in place to try to help you both navigate that in a healthy way.
And the last question I have for you is, um, could you share a time that you've handled rejection in the past and whether it was, a driver or if it was in a public place, like how did you personally handle that situation?
It's a really good question. I would say, in general, with education, I've been able to conquer most restaurant denials that I've had. I would say the most profound and common feelings of rejection do occur with Uber and Lyft. And it's a cause that's not only frustrating, but very near and dear to my heart. It was a pleasure attending the rideshare rally back in the fall, on behalf of Guiding Eyes for the Blind. But I would say navigating that type of rejection is really difficult because there's pressure to get where you need to go. Advocating under pressure, as many of us know, is extra challenging. Whether you're trying to get to an appointment, whether you're trying to just get home, whether you're worried about being late to work and being penalized by your supervisor, whether you are simply cold and it's raining and or it's snowing, there's a blizzard outside, and you're just trying to get out of that adverse weather. There's pressure. So reject if advocacy under pressure is difficult, rejection under pressure is even worse because it's an insult to your pride. It's hard when someone isn't seeing your point because you so desperately believe in it. You are so familiar with the laws. How can someone not be on the same page as you? It's really difficult coming to that realization that you have different opinions and different understandings and different educational backgrounds. Um, how I've managed that is to say, okay, I need to pause because I know I'm getting upset. I know I'm going to start yelling at the driver if I continue. And I know if I do that, my guide dog is going to be stressed. He's going to react to that because the dogs don't understand what's happening to them. And they are one half of the guide dog team. So I have to remind myself of that mid-denial that this is the situation I'm in, this is the reality. And some people, as hard as we try, are not willing to be educated. So instead of wasting my valuable time, I'm going to lodge a complaint both with Uber and Lyft and the Department of Justice. I'm going to post on social media. I'm going to do what I have control over and what I can hopefully affect change by doing, but still not costing myself more time than I have to in an uncomfortable and potentially unsafe situation. So I just think about those factors. I also think about if I'm really not getting through to the person, if they really don't understand me and they feel that threatened, then whatever I say, as long as I'm standing there with the dog, whatever I say is not going to change their mind. And it's important for their companies to hold them accountable, looking for systems that we can all advocate for, as organizations, as guide dog schools that hold the drivers accountable through their companies, I think is a priority. So again, in dealing with rejection personally, I try to think about the bigger outcome. What can I actually control? What are my next steps forward? Because I'm not getting anywhere with this one individual, but perhaps I can get somewhere in tackling it as a bigger goal.
Again, Melissa, thank you so much. I really appreciate the professional as well as personal insights that you've given us in regarding, having to educate people and just, being able to stand your ground in your rights, but also doing what's best for you and your dog. So again, thank you.
Of course, you're welcome.
Thank you so much, Melissa. That was very insightful. I know I've been to Guiding Eyes lecture with you twice now, and I still learn something different each time you say something. So that was incredible. Thank you so much for sharing with us. Um, Next up, I it is my pleasure to introduce Jessica Liljegren. I am so sorry if I butchered your last name.
Yes.
Um, she she is our amazing Uber and Lyft driver who's going to talk to us a little bit more about Uber's policy, Uber and Lyft's policy. So I'm going to hop right in with the first question. Um,
All right.
can can you explain Uber's policy as it regards to the transportation of service dogs and guide dogs in your vehicle?
Um, According to their policy, we are not allowed to deny a ride. There's also another policy where the rider, are not supposed to be charged for a cleaning fee if you're, for pet hair or dog hair, excuse me. Um, but they, but yeah, we're not allowed to deny any kind of ride.
So just to clarify, regardless of your personal, like, what would you say if the Uber driver or whoever is afraid of dogs or has allergies? Like, what is there a specific policy in Uber's contract that you guys signed that addresses this, or
They don't address that. They say that whether your personal feelings or any allergy problems, or they do mention any religious objections as well, have to be put aside.
yes? So that's kind of in line with the ADA, so that's very good to hear.
Mhm.
Um, so the next question I have for you is, um, what do you know about your legal rights when it come and the Americans with Disability Acts when it comes to passengers with guide dogs?
I know that it is illegal to discriminate. I know a little bit more than some people because of my affiliation with people that are blind. I have a lot of blind friends. Um, Probably a lot of other drivers are not as aware because they don't have to deal with ADA stuff on a daily basis. Um, but I personally am I'm personally when I have to do a job, when you start any job, you kind of have to sign a contract that when you have to perform their duties that they ask you to do, regardless of what your feelings are, and that's kind of how it's the same thing with me with Lyft and Uber.
Yeah, that's it. I'm so glad you brought up the contract. Kind of along those lines, have you received or does Uber provide any training or information materials when you guys are hired or when you guys sign that contract regarding how to relate with passengers that have service animals or guide dogs?
They do. They have you watch training videos, and you have to sign off that you've watched them and then you understood. Um, Lyft does the exact same thing. Their videos are a little bit different, but it's pretty much the same message.
Yeah, so that's good to hear that, like it is mandatory, and Uber drivers and Lyft drivers are very much aware of what their duties are in the contract, right?
Yeah. Yes, they won't let you drive until you've performed these videos.
So, that's good to hear. So can you tell us a bit more about have you any of your experiences with passengers that have service dogs or guide dogs? Um, what went wrong, what went well, and what challenges do you think occurred, or if any?
Honestly, I haven't had that many. I think I've only had one customer that had a guide dog. But I've had other blind people as well not bring their guide dog on purpose because of their experiences with other Uber drivers. But I've only had one dog, nothing crazy happened. They just, they sat on the floor. They didn't do any barking or anything like that.
Yeah, that's good. That's good because that's the behavior we expect from, service animals. So that's very good. Um, how would you handle a situation if when you pick up a shared ride and one of the passengers has a service dog or a guide dog and the other one does not want to share the ride with them? How would you handle that situation?
I don't have experience in that. Sharing rides is not available in all cities. It depends on the population. Like, of course, DC and Baltimore would have it, but I live in near Norfolk, and there's not as much people here. But from, you know, how I would handle it if it did occur, whoever had the dog, I would ask them, like, if the other person's scared, I'd say, like, do you want to sit in the front or in the back on the other side? See if we can put a barrier in between. If they still have a problem with it, I would ask them to probably cancel the ride. If I'm in mid-ride, most of the time I can't cancel it unless there's an emergency. But I would ask them to cancel the ride and see if you can find another one. The person without the dog I'm referring to.
Yes. So in this situation, you believe that the person that has the issue should cancel, right?
Yes.
Completely agree. Thank you. So, the last question I have for you is what improvements or additional resources would you like to see Uber and Lyft provide their drivers or their clients with service animals?
Lyft is a little bit better about it than Uber is. They're very open-minded. I think they're a little more open-minded than Uber is about, LGBTQIA and other things. So they have more of a list of how to interact and how to take care of somebody. Uber doesn't have that. They kind of leave it up to the driver about what to do. um, I think they should have more of like a guideline, say, hey, if you do have a service animal, this is how you should do it. But they don't have anything like that, which I think they should.
That I think that would be beneficial to both parties because it gives more of a clear um, rule book us in a way and
Right.
more clear guidelines. So I completely agree. Um,
Mhm.
I did say that was the last question, but I think people might be interested to hear. Could you speak a little bit more about the new policy Uber is rolling out um,
Yes.
about disclosing if you have a service animal?
Yes, they actually sent me an email a few days ago about it. They have it available where you can put that you have a guide dog into your profile, and it will let me know that there is a guide dog that's going to be accompanying you, which I think would be great because when we get a ride, all we pretty much know is about where we're going and how much the ride is going to give to us. So I think it would be really good that they would have that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jessica. Thank you for speaking to us just to get so we all get like a full view of the what Uber drivers and Lyft drivers are expected to have known and completed before they, started driving. So thank you so much for doing this with us. Does
You're welcome.
anyone have any questions for either Melissa or Jessica?
Taylor.
Go ahead, Taylor.
I have a question for Jessica. So with the new feature that they have implemented with Uber,
Mhm.
when exactly does it let you know that the rider will have a service dog? Is it after you accept or right before you pick them up or when?
That's a good question. I have not had it come up yet, so I'm not really sure. Usually they have that kind of thing like right when the indication pops up that you have a new ride. It tells you pretty much like where you're going and how much the ride is going to give you. They would have any other additional information like a message or anything like that.
Oh, okay. I'm just asking because it may seem as though it's a good a good idea, but then it will allow more opportunity for people to deny us before they come, you know?
Yeah, I
Um,
get that.
yeah, so I'm just wondering how it will go, and especially because I'm in Louisiana,
Oh,
it's a lot different here.
I bet. I can kind of honestly, I think it would make it a little bit faster to get a ride because when somebody sees a ride, they have the option to decline um when it pops up. So if that pops up, they can decline and it'll go through people that will decline faster until it hits somebody that will take it. But I can see why it might I can
Yeah.
see how that would make it a little bit longer to find one too.
Yeah, I do
So it's
see
kind
what
of
you're
a double-edged
saying.
sword there.
So we don't have to wait the 10 minutes until they get there and then argue with them and you know.
Right. I mean, it'll definitely stay with that because you don't have to worry about it, and then you don't have to worry about them coming up, seeing the dog, and then just leaving. I've had Uber rides where they would deny or they would cancel the ride just because I sent them a message. So people would just kind of cancel willy-nilly a lot for really weird things. Um, yeah,
Oh, okay. Well, thank you.
you're very welcome.
Any further questions for either Melissa or Jessica?
Kelsey,
Go ahead, Kelsey.
I have a question for Melissa. I was wondering, how do you best um advocate for people who are scared of dogs?
A great question because I think there are plenty of people who have valid fears of dogs. Maybe they've been attacked at a young age, maybe they don't have any experience around dogs. And let's be honest, for those of us who have, let's say, a Labrador Retriever, we know that the only the only thing that they're ever going to bite is food. They love their food. They're not out to harm other people. It's just really, really not in their instincts. But for someone else who doesn't have experience with dogs, they don't see a Labrador Retriever, they see a big dog. So that can be very intimidating to people who have either negative experiences or no experiences with dogs. What I would say is the same rules apply that I mentioned before, explaining that you're blind or visually impaired. This dog is responsible for helping you travel. You work as a team to get where you need to go, using that language, but also describing it in terms of this is what qualifies a guide dog. It's good behavior. It's my dog's ability to be calm. Even sometimes explaining the positioning of the dog in the driver's car. So, for example, my guide dog is going to back into the vehicle and lay on the floor and back. It will not come in contact with you. Or, hey, look at my guide dog. He or she is calmly sitting, right? They're not going to hurt you. Look at their body language, look at how they're acting, look at how attentive they are to me. There's been cases where I'll even do a couple commands or give my dog a treat so they can see, oh, the dog's eating out of her hand. He's just eating a treat. He's not aggressive in any sort of way, right? So if you can try to explain some of those good behaviors to a driver, that can be really helpful to kind of set the difference between your average pet dog and a guide dog. Again, sometimes just a demonstration or an explanation can be really helpful. And you will have those people who don't want to confront fears. It's common for a lot of people, whether it's dog related or not. It can be really tricky to confront fears. So knowing that, right, knowing the person is uncomfortable, if you continue to be confrontational with them and it's clear that you're not getting anywhere in that education about their fears. Again, as soon as you approach the car, they're going to grow hostile. Fear makes people act out. Their assumptions could make them act out. So again, in the best interest of safety, just be mindful of that. If they're unwilling to move past fears, usually you can tell whether or not it's legitimate. Oftentimes you do just have to tell them you need to cancel the ride then. Um, if you're not willing to be educated, if you're not willing to hear what I have to say, um, then you're not going to be able to get to your destination, unfortunately, if they're not willing to work with or confront their fear.
Noah,
Go ahead, Noah.
Just to respond to Taylor Franks's question, I know I'm not a panelist, but I looked this up. Uber's new policy, if you do disclose that you are a service dog or service animal user, it does notify the driver. If the driver then attempts to cancel the ride, it informs the driver that it's illegal and that it may have consequences for them as a driver. And if they do cancel, that information will be logged for Uber to take action, potential action. So it is a much more robust policy, it seems. Also, Morgan Estes has raised their hand. I don't know if they have a question.
Oh, go ahead, Morgan. I'm so sorry I did not see that. Thank you, Noah.
Hi, I just had a question for, I guess, Jessica. Is it better if you message the driver or like have the service dog like thing on your account? Like, which is better for the driver? Like, or is it good to have both? Like,
I think it's good to have both. Well, I mean, it depends on the person. I mean, it always depends on the person. You know, so, as I said before, some people drop the ride if they get a message just because they got a message. They didn't even read the message because they don't want to deal with. They think that's like a person being difficult. I personally don't think that. They're just trying to give you information, but I know a lot of drivers that do that.
If I may add on to that really quick, this is just about phrasing your message itself. If you do choose that route, I always recommend, again, not a foolproof solution, nothing is, but if you are attempting to let the driver know that you have a guide dog or, as natural as people who are blind or visually impaired, sometimes we need to indicate to the driver where we're standing so they can find us since we can't look for their license plate information on their car and the type of vehicle they have. Some people choose to send a message, but if you choose to do that, I would say minimize the presence of your guide dog and instead place an emphasis on the fact that you are blind or visually impaired and you are asking for an accommodation related to accessibility. So what I mean by that is put the emphasis on, hi, I'm so-and-so, and again, knowing there's character limits. Hi, I'm so-and-so. I'm standing to the left of the main entrance wearing a blue dress with a guide dog sitting, or I'm blind, I can't see your car. Please verbally identify when you arrive. I'm standing to the left of the main entrance wearing a blue dress with a guide dog sitting next to me. By phrasing a message in that way, you've put the emphasis on them looking for you because you're blind or visually impaired and can't see their car, instead of putting the emphasis on the guide dog. And sometimes someone seeing that in writing, they're not just all of a sudden seeing a dog and canceling on you right away because they see a dog. Instead, they've had your message that says, I'm blind, so they can more easily put the pieces together if they're willing to do so. Again, not a foolproof solution, but if you try to explain in writing that you're blind or visually impaired first, sometimes people can connect the dots and figure out that the dog does have that purpose. It is not, in fact, a pet dog.
Thank you so much for that addition, Melissa. You did mention that when I was in class with you in January, and I do want to say I started doing that, and I don't know, they've just been more accommodating. So completely second that. Um, Annette, is your hand raised?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question for Jessica. So
Sure.
you mentioned in the very beginning that you have to watch videos or whatever about service animals and all that. After you're initially hired, do you ever get periodic reminders about this, or do you have to watch additional videos, or how much extra emphasis is put on guide dogs beyond just the initial hire?
They do send videos if there is enough updates, but if it's just like one thing that they added, then they just send you an email explaining everything, but you don't have to like re-sign saying like that you read it unless it's a major thing.
So do you get a reminder email like once a month, or once every 6 months? I mean, how often do you get reminded about that?
Honestly, not very often. I mean, obviously the initial hire stuff, when they started being a little more serious about the guide dog stuff, they had us do extra videos. And then recently with the putting the guide dog thing on your profile, they just emailed me that one. They didn't give me an extra video.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, you're welcome.
Does anyone have any other questions before we move on to the next part of our agenda tonight? Nope. Okay. Thank you again, Melissa and Jessica, for fielding those questions and speaking. I'm gonna hand it off to Lucas, who is gonna introduce the next part of our meeting. Lucas.
This is Lauren. I don't believe that Lucas is currently on the call.
Oh,
This is
okay.
Albert Elia. Is this the point where I should introduce myself?
Yeah, yes. So we have a wonderful representative from NAGDU who is going to talk a little bit more about what they do and what they're all about. So go ahead.
Hi, so this is Albert Elia. I'm on the board of the National Association of Guide Dog Users, and primarily the area that I focus on is dealing with transportation issues, be that rideshare and also air travel. I do want to mention one thing. I heard Melissa talk about like sending a message to the driver explaining that you're blind and you have a guide dog. If you do choose to enroll in the self ID system for Uber, then it's important that if you choose to tell the driver in a text message or an Uber message that you are blind and use a service animal, that will negate the functions of self ID. The way that Uber's self ID currently works is that the self ID does not tell the driver that you have a guide dog or a service animal until they are approaching your pickup area, and that is something like when they're, I believe, somewhere around 250 feet away. And if you want to sort of take advantage of the benefits of the self ID, where if the driver cancels after getting that message, then or after the sort of rider card pops up and they would be in a position to see the service animal, and have the sort of app detect that and send you the message or the notification saying, hey, looks like maybe you got denied because of your service animal. Do you want us to investigate this? That will only work if the cancellation happens after the rider card pops up on their screen, which, like I said, is about, when they're about 250 feet away. So if you're going to mention in a message anything about yourself, I certainly still do that, but I don't mention my service animal. I just mention that I'm blind and what I'm wearing so that, they can know to look for me and that they need to sort of let me know when they've arrived. But I don't mention the dog anymore, because if you do and they cancel and you do that before they're very close, then you run the risk that the self ID system is not going to perform the benefits of the self ID system. So that's just something to keep in mind if you choose to, get a guide dog or use a guide dog and choose to use self ID with Uber. The Lyft system is still in its pilot phase, and I can't really say how that's going to work at the end of the day. But I can tell you that so far it seems like it is working a little differently, and that it is currently identifying you immediately after pairing. If that's a way that you like to be identified, then that is something that you may want to consider once Lyft finalizes and releases its service animal opt-in feature. And certainly once that happens, we'll probably have another town hall, hopefully with a Lyft representative, but at the very least, with pilot participants who can sort of speak to how it is that the Lyft system works. In addition to the stuff that I do on the sort of transportation beat at NAGDU, we also do advocacy and help guide dog users who encounter problems either in the employment context or with their schools or elsewhere when they restaurants, etc., when they encounter problems and denials where they are denied because of their service animal. We sort of provide guidance on how to advocate for yourself and your rights, and hopefully that is helps resolve the issue, and where it doesn't, while we don't provide representation, I myself am a lawyer and I'm very tied into the community of disability rights lawyers, and so we can certainly help people who continue to encounter barriers even after the advocacy may have failed.
Thank you so much.
And if anyone has any questions, then by all means, please ask them.
Thank you so much for speaking and giving us a little bit more description of what you do and what NAGDU is all about. So we are actually going to hop right into the last part of our meeting, which is our mock denial scenario. So, but before we do that, I just want to let everyone know that as the meeting is wrapping up, we're putting in a bunch of resources for if anyone is interested. There are there's Uber's policy about service animals that has been already been put in the chat, and I believe Noah, you have a resource to put there as well. Could you take a minute and just tell us really briefly about that and then put that in?
Absolutely. So this is a podcast episode which we produced here at the National Association of Blind Students, discussing the rally at Uber, and Lyft headquarters, which the NFB held on October 15th, 2024. We're talking with two students who participated in that. Almost all the information in that is still applicable. It's a really interesting resource if you're interested in how that went. The only thing that is of note there is that the information on Uber's policies, Uber's and Lyft's policies, is changing. So you have the most up-to-date information just by being here. So there is some discussion of Uber and Lyft policy in that podcast that is not up to date, but everything else is. And I'll get you a link to that here very shortly.
Okay, thank you so much, Noah. Okay, so last but certainly not least, we have our mock denial skit. So Taylor is gonna act the part of a guide dog user who is attempting to get into an Uber, and then Sergio is gonna be our lovely Uber driver who is gonna deny her access. So guys, take it away.
Hello, are you Dave?
Yeah. Is that a dog? No, that's not gonna work out. I'm sorry, miss. This is not gonna work out. Can you
She,
cancel the ride?
sir, she's my service dog. She's my guide dog. Wherever I go, she goes with me. She is a mobility tool for me. Um, may I ask why you're not comfortable with her getting in your car?
Yeah, it's just I'm not comfortable with dogs and allergies, allergies. And also it costs a lot of money to take care of the car. The hair, everything. It's just not gonna work out, miss. It's really not gonna work out. Can you please cancel the ride?
Okay, sir. Like I said, she's a service dog. She is my guide dog. She goes anywhere I go. And according to the American with Disabilities Act, you cannot deny us access. And you signed a contract saying that you would let um anyone with a service animal, a legitimate service animal, to get into your vehicle. I understand that you have allergies. We can roll down the window, or if you have an inhaler, you can use that. She will get down by my feet and she won't be moving around a lot, so hair won't be going everywhere. And she'll be very calm for the 10-minute ride that we have.
You know what? She also looks very vicious. I think I'm quite scared. I don't think we can do this. She might do something.
She's not vicious. She's very calm. She she obeys to every command that I tell her to do. Would you like me to demonstrate to make you feel a little bit more comfortable?
Sure, but I don't think it's gonna convince me that vicious look. She's looking at me with those eyes.
I think she's just confused while we're sitting out here in the rain. But I can just show you a few commands. I'll just tell her to sit, and she sat, and to lay down, and she laid down, and to stand up, and to stay. See, she's staying, and she is just ready to get into the vehicle to get home.
Well, Miss, are you sure you can't cancel? Really, gotta get going and everything. This really won't work out. It's
Okay, I can see that you're nervous and you're not willing to learn from the information that I'm providing you. So I'm not going to cancel. You can cancel because if I cancel, then I will not get my money back because you're already here. So please cancel the ride so they can assign me another driver so I can get home and out of the rain.
whoa, Miss. There's no need for that sass. We need to relax and we can cancel. You can cancel the ride, right? It's not a
Sir,
big
you can either
deal.
cancel the ride or bring me to my location. Which one would you rather?
All right. I'm leaving. That dog, those eyes, yeah,
Okay, have a
real
wonderful
vicious.
day.
Marvelous. That sass, Sergio. Wow. You were irritating me too. Wonderfully done, Taylor. That was so well done. Very eloquently said. Um, does anyone have any further questions about why Taylor made those decisions, educating and anything on that at all, or any last minute questions for Jessica and Melissa?
I have something to add. It's really funny how Sergio is talking about the eyes because people have told me that my guide dog has like human eyes. So it's funny how he said that but hasn't really met her.
That's crazy.
I've had
I feel like
someone tell me that before.
really.
Lindsay,
Go ahead, Lindsay.
um, I just love the line where Taylor said, "It's obvious you're not willing to learn." And I feel like if I were a driver and somebody said that to me, I think I'd feel guilty and I would say, "Yes, I need to learn and I need to learn from this experience." So very well done.
Thank you.
I completely agree. You had a lot more patience, and that was just very well done.
I feel like if I was actually in rain, I probably wouldn't have been as patient, but
Understandable.
Lauren,
Go ahead, Lauren.
Morgan Estes, I believe, also has a raised hand.
Oh, I'm so sorry, guys. Go ahead, Morgan.
Oh, I was just wondering, what you would say you should do, like, if your school, like, had anything to say about your guide dog, like,
like what kind of school? Like college or
yeah,
high
like
school?
your college, like, if they
Um, so at
didn't.
my college, I never really had an issue. We just register our service animals with the Office of Disability Services. And I've actually, I think it was Melissa who said that her professor had made comments and stuff about her guide dog. I've never had that because I do meet with my professors beforehand via Zoom to let them know, about the material and about having a service dog. So I never had like a professor discriminate against me or say things, but I have had professors like be like call roll and they will call her name. And I'll be like, Don't call her name, she's working," you know, or people who know her around campus try to say hello. But I've never had my campus say anything. I will say that I have brought some things to their attention, such as there not being any service dog relief areas, or, if she does use the bathroom in the grass, it's hard for me to find a trash can because they constantly move them. So I've mentioned that, and they said there's not enough guide dogs or whatever to do that. So they would basically just be doing it for one or two people. Um, but I've never had like the university discriminate.
Lauren.
Go ahead, Lauren.
So, quick add-on to Taylor's answer, because I've also had similar situations with professors calling roll and calling my guide dog's name and such. And one thing that I do, and that I've found kind of successful, is that I give a fake name for my dog for when people try to, call her attention and stuff like that on campus. So her actual name is Gracie, but her stage name is Pirate. And that way, if somebody's calling her on campus and things like that, she doesn't necessarily recognize that as one of her like one of the names that I use for her. So it seems to be relatively successful. But just echoing Taylor's point about just making sure you stand up for yourself and be very clear about the fact that you should not be calling the dog's name in public.
Yeah, I actually have a question for other guide dog users. So what do you do on campus, for example? I was walking from the bus stop to my house, and someone walked up beside me and grabbed my guide dog's handle, and I didn't even know what to do in that moment. I was just shocked, and it's happened a few times. I don't know if that's ever happened to you guys, and what you would recommend to say or do.
This is Melissa. I'm happy to jump in and answer that question if you'd like. Obviously, it's concerning. It's also a huge safety risk because your guide dog is understandably confused. Now it's pulling two people. I think some people, either they're trying to pet the dog, they accidentally grab the handle, or it is intentional. Maybe they think they're stopping you from danger. We all know how many people have attempted to grab our cane or grabbed our dog's leash or harness. It happens on a more frequent basis than I'd care to admit, which is very frustrating. What I choose to say to educate those people is to say, hi, I'm visually impaired or I'm blind. My guide dog is leading me to our destination with my directions. We are a team. You are interfering with our communication and our teamwork to get where we need to go. Please remove your hand from the harness handle. Just start by explaining why this is dangerous or why it's inappropriate. Some people don't understand that. The most reasonable person will, just explaining this harness is how I communicate with my guide dog, and you are currently interrupting that communication.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, that really helps because I was just frozen in shock, and
Yeah.
I was just I don't know what to say. Let go.
Yeah, let go. Please don't touch my guide dog's equipment. Sometimes even just a simple statement like that is good enough. I've certainly had my fair share of even bus drivers, interestingly enough, trying to grab my dog's leash. Usually people are trying to use that as a method to direct us. Sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
They think that that's the best way to give us direction. And if you sense that that's the intent, you can instead say something like, oh, if you're trying to help, please let me ask you for that help. Or if you're trying to give me directions, please speak to me directly and don't try to manipulate my guide dog in any way. I'm in charge of giving him or her commands.
Okay. Great. Yeah, I had a lot of issues with like especially people at TSA as well. They've tried to grab her leash or something like that. So that really helps. Thank you.
Of course, yeah. TSA is a never-ending battle, so I get that.
Yeah.
Melissa, what did you do when your professor said something about your guide dog?
So it was a really odd situation. For additional context, this professor had been dodging pre-class emails as well. So he wasn't even aware that there was a blind student in his class because he never responded to meetings about our accommodations. So that kind of sets the precedent for the type of person that we're dealing with. Just very unresponsive, just very, very aloof, unwilling to even check his email, let alone invest in proper treatment of a student. So I was, mind you, I was just so shocked. A lot of us are quick to respond, and some of us kind of freeze, and that's okay. I don't think it's something to be embarrassed about. Some of us are just in such shock with the denial or poor treatment. Sometimes we just need to process it and take a step back and figure out, what do I do next? This is nothing I was anticipating. Up to that point, I'd had no issues with professors. Everyone was very respectful, both in class and outside of class, towards my guide dog. So in that case, I just had to take a deep breath and try to explain, because his claim was, I have allergies. I'm allergic to dog saliva. I don't know what I'm going to do. I had to explain, this is a trained guide dog. He's not going to get on your lap and start licking you in the middle of our lecture. He's going to lay by my side as he is right now. There's going to be no change in his position during class. And that wasn't enough for him. So he asked me to move. At this point, I was embarrassed. This was a discussion happening in front of 20 people. I did move. If I had been more confident, I think less in shock, I think I would have stood my ground. But I was mortified. I didn't want to seem like the person who was confrontational in that meeting. So I did move. I dealt with his comments throughout class. Again, I was just absolutely mortified that this was happening in front of 20 other students. And immediately following that class, I went right over to the Office for People with Disabilities. I told them what happened. They brought in the Dean of Students. I, again, repeated my story, and that's when they got external sources involved. They pulled witnesses from class. So it turned into a big investigation. So sometimes the advocacy happens afterwards, and that's okay too. So just knowing that there's a pressure to act in the moment, but yeah, go ahead.
I'm definitely someone who freezes when I encounter someone who like grabs my chain, because I don't have a guide dog yet, but
Yeah. And it's common for a lot of us. I don't think we talk about that nearly enough as guide dog handlers, but if that does happen to you, know that it's not over. Just because you didn't advocate for yourself in that precise moment, you can still bring the situation and escalate it to people after the fact. That also goes for if discrimination happens somewhere else and you need to file a police report. Just because you didn't have the energy to call the police in that moment doesn't mean you can't file a complaint with them after the fact. So always keep that in mind. There's additional steps you can take after.
okay. Sorry for interrupting you. I didn't mean to.
No, you're good. You're good.
Thank you so much, Melissa. It is sadly the end of our time together. Melissa Carney, amazing. You're always informational and always so wise with your words. I feel like you have like unending experience, and I'm so grateful for you guys, for you being on this call today and talking to all of us and spreading your knowledge. Jessica, thank you so much for bringing in a different viewpoint that is not often always heard in these type of spaces, so we appreciate you for that. And thank you for everyone who came. I hope you got something from this call. This is something that is very important to a lot of people, so I'm so happy you guys came and got this experience. I put my email in the chat, osoluozo@udel.edu. If anyone has any further questions for either Melissa or Jessica, you can shoot them to me and I'll make sure you get a response. So thank you guys so much for coming. Have a wonderful night and
Thank you for having me.
Good luck with your week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So.
Thank you so much.
We'd also like to thank Albert Elia from the National Association of Guide Dog Users for coming along. And I'm sure if you have any questions or would like to get in touch with him, Soso can facilitate that. I'm not sure if his email is available on the NAGDU website.
Okay, I was about to ask about that. I didn't know how to get involved with them, but I would like to.
I can connect you. I have his email. So if anyone wants to be connected, I'm so sorry I left that out. If anyone wants to be connected or has any questions for him, just shoot them to me also and I'll connect you with him.
Okay, thank y'all so much for having me.